Yes, you read that correctly. The candles are burning. The doors of that small church in South Jersey just opened. And what is unfolding on the other side of these walls is something the internet has been trying to peek at for weeks without ever being allowed to step this close. I am standing here, right now, on May the 4th, the night of Ashley Jana's wake. And tomorrow I will be on this same patch of pavement on May the 5th for the rest of the wake and the funeral that follows. So before we go any further into what I just saw inside, before we get into the names that walked through those doors, before we touch the moment that made the entire room tilt sideways, and before we open the card that they pressed into my hand at the entrance, a card that I genuinely believe carries a hidden message from her parents to all of us, I want to say something that I want you to hold on to for the entire length of this video. What I am about to tell you is not gossip. It is not speculation dressed up as journalism. It is not a man chasing a clip on the back of a young woman's casket. I have been on this case from the very first night the news broke. I have studied every interview, every flight record, every word out of Tanzania, and every silence from the people who should have been speaking the loudest. So when I tell you that what happened inside this building tonight changed the way I think about this entire story, I need you to lean in, because what I witnessed tonight is the kind of thing that does not make it into a press release. And it is the kind of thing you only catch if you stand outside for hours and watch who walks in, who they hug, who they avoid, and who, for reasons nobody is willing to say out loud yet, was still allowed within arm's reach of that open casket. Before I take you through every single beat of what happened tonight, please tap that like button, please hit subscribe, and please ring that notification bell, because I am coming back here tomorrow morning, and you do not want to be the one person in your group chat who missed what gets said next. And listen, I know how the comments are going to come. I know there will be people who think a wake should never be filmed from any angle, even from across the street, even with a deliberate distance, even with the camera turned away from the doors. I hear you. I respect that instinct. And that is exactly why I have stationed myself as far back from this building as I possibly could without losing the shot. You will not see a single mourner's face. You will not see the family entrance. You will not see anything that the family has asked me not to see. Because the second I rolled up to this corner, the very first question I asked was whether this was open to the public, and the answer that came back was yes. The family chose, intentionally and openly, to share this night with the world. So I am here as a guest, not as a hunter. And the line I will not cross tonight is this. I will not describe Ashlee. I will not describe the casket. I will not describe the way her body was laid out, the dress she was placed in, or the flowers that surrounded her. That is not for me to give you, and it is not for any creator on this platform to give you either. What I will give you is everything else. The room, the crowd, the silence, the suspicion, the names, the absences, and the one short passage on the back of a printed card that, the more I read it, the more I am convinced is the closest thing we are going to get to a public statement from a mother and a father who have not yet been allowed to truly speak. So with all of that said, let me walk you through tonight, exactly the way I lived it, minute by minute, breath by breath, because by the time I finish, I think you are going to see this entire case the way I now see it. And I think you are going to understand why my hands have not stopped shaking since I walked out of that doorway. The first thing you need to picture is the geography, because the geography matters more than anybody covering this case has admitted so far. We are not in Newark. We are not in Atlantic City. We are not in any place that pulls helicopters over the rooftops or news vans into the parking lot. We are in a town called Paulsboro, New Jersey, and forgive me if I am butchering the pronunciation, because the locals say it with a softness that I cannot quite imitate. This is a small town. Or, to be fully fair, this is what feels like a small town to somebody like me who walks through cities for a living. There is a row of homes right across the way. There is a single church standing in the middle of the block, the Second Baptist Church, the one you can see right behind my left shoulder over there where that blue car is parked under the streetlight. There are families on these porches. There are kids on bicycles 2 blocks over. There is no skyline. There is no bustle. There is a quietness that wraps around your chest the moment you step out of the car. This is not the kind of place that knows how to host the international spotlight. This is the kind of place where everybody at the gas station nods at you because they assume they have already met you. And the second I started walking up the sidewalk toward that church, I felt it. I felt the warmth of a community that has clearly closed ranks around a daughter that the world only met after she was already gone. You can feel the love. You can feel the protection. You can feel the local nature of every single person in eyesight. And I want you to hold that picture in your head, because the contrast between what this town feels like and what is actually unfolding inside that church tonight is going to become very, very important in about 3 minutes. Walking up to the building, I was instantly funneled toward 2 separate doorways. There was an entrance carved out for the family on the side of the church, the one tucked away from the cameras, the one that the Robinsons could slip through without ever having to make eye contact with the public. And then there was the other entrance, the one closer to where I am standing now, the one with the long, slow line of people stretching out into the parking lot. That was the public entrance. That was the doorway the family deliberately opened, so that anybody who had been moved by Ashlee's story could come, could pay respects, could feel a part of the goodbye. I want to be very clear about this, because I have already seen comments on my last upload accusing me of forcing my way into a private grief. I did not. The Second Baptist Church website itself, the one anyone with a phone can pull up in 10 seconds, advertises this evening as a celebration of life. Those are the exact words on the flyer. There is no use of the word funeral. There is no use of the word memorial. The family chose to share Ashlee's spirit, her joy, and her story with the public, and I came to honor that invitation, nothing more. Now what I will say is that the public side of that line was thinner than I expected. The public turnout was modest. It was respectful. It was the kind of crowd that is made up of strangers who became invested in a story they were never supposed to be invested in. The family side, on the other hand, was something else entirely, and that is where the first thread of tonight's mystery starts to pull loose, and once it pulls, it does not stop unraveling. Before I crossed the threshold, the usher stopped me. Polite, calm, but firm. No bags. No backpacks. No purses for the men. No cameras of any kind once you step inside. They saw the side bag I was carrying, the one with my laptop and my notebook in it, and they shook their heads. I told them, look, this is just my work gear, this is just my equipment, but the rules were the rules. And then one of the ushers, a kind older gentleman with the most genuinely warm voice I have heard all week, leaned in and offered to walk my bag back to his own car and watch it for me until I came out. Just like that. A complete stranger, in the middle of mourning a community member, offered to babysit $1,000 worth of my equipment because he did not want me to have to choose between paying respects and protecting my livelihood. I want you to absorb that for a second, because that one tiny moment told me everything I needed to know about what kind of community Ashley Jana was raised inside. I thanked him. I declined. I called my cousin who had dropped me off, and I asked him to come back and grab the bag for me at the curb. I did not know that usher. I had no reason to trust him with my life. But the fact that he offered, with no hesitation, with no expectation of anything in return, told me that the people who shaped this woman are not the kind of people the rest of the internet has been imagining. They are not loud. They are not flashy. They are not running toward microphones. They are the kind of people who take a stranger's bag to their own car, so the stranger does not have to feel awkward at a wake. Remember that, because every single thing that happens after this point has to be filtered through that lens. Inside the building, the first thing I want you to picture is the size of the room. It was small. Not cramped, but small. Not gilded, not overdressed, not built for cameras. The kind of sanctuary that has held generations of christenings and graduations and weddings and, yes, funerals. There was no theater lighting. There was no stage production. There was a quiet kind of beauty in how unbothered the building was by the international attention pressing against its walls outside. And standing at the front of that room, framed by everything that the family had chosen, were the 4 people whose faces have been on every news graphic for the last month. On one side stood Ashlee's mother, and beside her, holding her quietly, was her current husband. On the other side stood Ashlee's father, and beside him, holding his arm with the steadiness of someone who had clearly rehearsed her own composure, was his wife. Both parents had positioned themselves in such a way that anyone walking up to pay respects would have to acknowledge both halves of the family. Nobody was excluded. Nobody was hidden in the back. And I want to highlight that, because in a story this messy, with this much speculation, with this much public infighting projected onto the parents, the very first decision they made tonight was to stand together at the front of the same building. That alone tells you something about how this family has chosen to grieve, regardless of how the internet has chosen to grade them. Ashlee's mother was visibly emotional. There were tears. There were the small, involuntary movements that anybody who has lost a child will recognize, the quiet shake of the shoulders, the way the breath catches when somebody new walks up. Ashlee's father, on the other hand, was a wall. I watched him for a long time, and I never once saw him cry. Not once. That does not mean he was not breaking on the inside. It does not mean he was unmoved. It means he was holding the room together with the only resource he had left, which was the discipline of his own posture. Both of these parents, in their own opposite ways, were standing strong. And the line of people moving past them, hugging them, whispering into their ears, never seemed to thin out, not for a single minute that I was inside that building. Now I want to walk you back outside for a second, because before I went in, I had already started counting heads on the family side, and what I saw out there has been chewing at the back of my brain ever since. There was a long, deep line snaking out of the family entrance. Not the public entrance, the family entrance. And I want to say something here that I am going to phrase very carefully, because I am not interested in turning a wake into a racial conversation, but I would be lying to you if I left this detail out, and you came here for the truth, not for the polished version. The line on the family side was overwhelmingly white. Now, here's the wrinkle. Ashlee's mother is remarried to a white man, so part of that line, naturally, would be made up of his side of the family. That is to be expected. That is normal. But the volume of white attendees who were filing into that building was, in my honest opinion, far beyond what one stepfather's family could account for. We are not talking about a handful of cousins or a row of in-laws. We are talking about a presence so significant that it changed the entire visual makeup of the family entrance. And I stood out there, watching that line, and the same question kept stacking on top of itself in my head. If this is not all from the stepfather's side, then who exactly are these people? And why are they here in numbers this large, on a night this private, for a young woman whose final hours are still wrapped in international questions that have not been answered? We are going to come back to that question. We are going to come back to it harder than you think. Around 6 o'clock the doors officially opened, and I made my way to the very back of the room. I did not want a front row seat. I did not want to insert myself into the family's grief. I wanted to be a quiet observer, and I wanted to take in the entire shape of the room without ever interrupting it. So I sat in the last row. I kept my hands folded. I watched, and around 6:20, something happened that made the entire back half of the sanctuary shift in their seats without anyone saying a single word. The door opened, and Joe Budden walked in. Alone. By himself. No entourage. No cameras. No publicist trailing behind him. He was wearing a Gucci cardigan that you would have spotted from across the parking lot, and on his head was a hat that he removed the moment his foot crossed the threshold, the way old school men used to do it, the way our grandfathers taught us to do it. Underneath that hat were a pair of black sunglasses that he kept on for almost the entire duration of his visit. He walked in with his head down, with no announcement, with the body language of a man who had genuinely come to mourn rather than to be seen mourning. He sat down by himself, in an aisle by himself, in the row directly in front of mine, sliding all the way to the end so that he was as close to invisible as a man like him is capable of being inside a small church in South Jersey. I am not going to describe his interactions in detail, because I do not believe his private grief belongs to me to translate. What I will say is that at one point, while the photographs and the video tribute of Ashlee were playing on the screen at the front of the sanctuary, he gently lifted those black glasses up off his face to get a clearer look. That moment is going to stay with me for a long time, and I will leave it at that. He stayed for 10, maybe 15 minutes. The pastor walked over at some point, shook his hand, exchanged a few words, and then Joe Budden quietly stood up, slipped out of that pew, put his hat back on, and walked out of the church the same way he had walked in. No noise. No spectacle. No social media post. He came, he sat, he watched, he left. And before any of you start typing the comment that has been forming in your head for the last 30 seconds, no, his being there does not answer any of the larger questions about this case. But it does add another thread to the tapestry, and I will take any thread I can get when the official channels have been so silent for so long. A few minutes earlier, the pastor had stepped to the front of the sanctuary and made an announcement that I want every single one of you to hear, because it tells you exactly how aware this family is of the storm that is circling outside the front door. Around 10 minutes after 6, he picked up the microphone and said, calmly but firmly, that camera crews had begun pulling up to the building, that he had been informed of multiple film crews already in the parking lot, and that anyone who needed to step outside for fresh air should ask an usher to escort them. The reason, he said, was simple. The family did not want any mourner to feel pressured into giving an interview. The family did not want this night to be turned into a spectacle for the world. He said those words exactly like that. A spectacle for the world. And when he said it, the entire room seemed to nod in unison. People who had been considering stepping out chose to stay seated. People who had been near the doors moved further inside. The pastor in that one short announcement managed to create a protective wall around a grieving family without ever raising his voice, and watching it happen in real time was a masterclass in pastoral leadership. I want you to imagine, for a moment, the kind of pressure this church has been under for the last 72 hours. International outlets have been pinging their phones. Tabloid blogs have been calling the office line. Camera crews have been parking on residential streets where the residents have been begging them to leave. And inside all of that noise, this pastor stood up, told his congregation to take a breath, and reminded them that the night belonged to Ashlee, not to the cameras. That alone earns the Second Baptist Church my respect for as long as I am covering this story. Now let me walk you through the small details that nobody else is going to tell you, because these are the details that paint the full picture of who Ashley Jana was to the people who actually loved her. The dress code, for one, was a quiet contradiction that perfectly matched the spirit of the night. Some mourners came in full black, the traditional uniform of grief that we all recognize from 100 funerals before. But others came dressed entirely in white, head to toe, the way you dress for a celebration, the way you dress when you are sending someone home rather than mourning their departure. That split was not random. That split was deliberate. The flyer for the evening, which I am still holding right now in my hand, never once uses the word funeral. It never once uses the word memorial. It calls this evening a celebration of life. And so the white you saw in that room was an act of obedience to the family's wishes. It was a refusal to let this night become a black-clad tragedy. It was a way of saying that Ashlee's story does not end in darkness, no matter how dark her final chapter became. That detail tore at me in a way that I was not expecting, because the family could have chosen any color. They could have chosen any tone. And instead they chose to send the world a message in the most subtle way possible, which is that whatever happened to their daughter, whatever still has to be answered, whatever still has to be uncovered, her life will not be remembered as a tragedy first. It will be remembered as a celebration. And every person walking through that doorway in white was carrying that message on their shoulders. Before I get to the part of this video that I genuinely think is the most important, the part that I think will reframe the way you have been reading this entire case, I need to circle back to the question I left dangling for you a few minutes ago. Who were all of those white attendees on the family side of the building? Because the more I sat in that back row tonight, the more this question kept sharpening itself into a needle. We know the demographic breakdown of Ashlee's immediate family. Her mother is remarried to a white man. Her father is remarried to a black woman. So when you walk into a wake, the racial makeup of the crowd should, in theory, reflect that blended dynamic. And yet, the volume of white mourners on the family side was, by my honest count, far in excess of what the stepfather's side could realistically supply. We are talking about a turnout that would suggest an entirely different family branch was present in that room. And the question that has been ringing in my ears since I left that sanctuary is this. Is it possible that we were looking at members of Joe McCann's family? The same Joe McCann who is, at the time of this recording, still in Tanzania. The same Joe McCann who reportedly does not currently have his passport. The same Joe McCann who, by every report we have seen so far, is being held under questioning, not officially classified as a suspect, but, in the eyes of Tanzanian investigators, a potential witness whose access to information has not yet been exhausted. The same Joe McCann whose previous marriage gave him 2 children, and the same Joe McCann whose 2 children Ashlee had been raising as her stepmother for years. If those children were brought to this wake, then it stands to reason that members of Joe McCann's extended family may have come along with them. And if that is the case, you have to sit with the strangeness of it. You have to sit with the fact that the relatives of a man who is still in foreign custody, still surrounded by unanswered questions, may have walked through that doorway tonight while he sat in a holding facility on the other side of the world. Imagine the silence of that moment. Imagine standing in a receiving line, hugging the parents of the woman whose final hours your family member was the last person to share, while that family member is still being questioned by a foreign government. That is the kind of weight that does not have a category in any of the etiquette books your grandmother handed down. And yet, that may have been exactly what was unfolding in front of my eyes for hours tonight. This is the part where I have to remind you that I am not stating any of this as fact. I am giving you the picture I observed and the questions that picture raises. I am giving you the puzzle pieces, and I am letting you decide what shape they form on your living room floor. We know, from the parents' own statements, that they have spoken very little to Joe McCann since this story began. We know that the very first contact came from Joe himself, when he reportedly placed a phone call to Ashlee's mother from a hospital in Tanzania. Beyond that single phone call, the communication has been described, in the family's own words, as minimal, almost non-existent. So when Ashlee's mother says that she has spoken very little to Joe McCann, the natural follow-up question is, does she mean that one phone call, or has there been any contact since? We do not know. The family has not clarified, and both parents, on multiple occasions, have publicly stated that they themselves still have questions. They themselves are not satisfied with the version of events they have been handed. They themselves are waiting for answers. And if that is the truth, if both of Ashlee's parents are still openly unsatisfied with the explanation surrounding their daughter's death, then how do you, as a grieving parent, allow the children of the man at the center of those unanswered questions to walk into the same building as your daughter's casket? How do you allow his side of the family to file into the receiving line? How do you stand at the front of that sanctuary and accept hugs from people whose last name you may still be quietly questioning? I am not condemning the choice. I am not even saying it was the wrong choice. I am only telling you that it is a choice that requires the kind of grace that almost none of us could muster. And tonight, those parents seem to be mustering it. We also have to remember that, as of the moment I am speaking these words, the official autopsy from Tanzania has either not been released, or if it has been completed, it has not been shared with the family or with the public. Tanzania, by its own laws, is not obligated to share anything with the United States government. We know that. We have reported it on this channel multiple times. The country is under no requirement to satisfy our curiosity. The American embassy can request information, but it cannot demand it. The family can request information, but they cannot demand it. And so, in the absence of an official cause of death from the country where Ashlee spent her final hours, the family has reportedly arranged for their own independent autopsy to be performed here in the United States, after Ashlee's body finally returned home, which I believe has now been somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks ago. The results of that independent autopsy have not yet been made public. So as of tonight, May the 4th, we still do not officially know how she died. We do not officially know if Joe McCann is a suspect. We do not officially know if he is only a witness. We do not officially know what the medical record will eventually reveal. We are operating in a fog, and that fog is exactly why every single small detail at this wake matters as much as it does. Because in the absence of facts, observation becomes the only currency we have left. And the observation I am leaving you with, take it for whatever it is worth, is that the people who appeared to be unfamiliar to Ashlee's stepfather's side of the family were warm, were tearful, were embraced like long-lost relatives, and seemed to know exactly where they fit inside the receiving line. Hold that image. We will need it later. Now we get to the part of this evening that I have been holding in my hand the entire time I have been speaking. When you walked into the sanctuary tonight, every single guest was handed a small printed card. This card, the one I am about to read to you. And I want to be crystal clear about something before I open it. Reading from this card does not violate any boundary, because this card was distributed, openly, freely, to every member of the public who walked through those doors. It is, by definition, a public document. The family chose for it to be public. And once you hear what is written on the back of it, I think you are going to understand exactly why I think this card is the closest thing we have, right now, to a public statement from Ashlee's parents about the state of their grief, the state of their patience, and the state of their faith. The front of the card has 2 photographs of Ashlee. One of her as a child, soft and smiling, frozen in a moment that any parent who has ever lost a child would recognize. And one of her as the adult woman the world came to recognize over the last several weeks. Beneath those photographs, the card reads, in clear, simple lettering, Ashlee Robinson. Sunrise, April the 5th, 1995. Sunset, April the 9th, 2026. That is it. 2 dates. A handful of years between them. The shortest summary of an entire human existence. And then you flip the card over, and on the back, you find a passage. I am going to read it to you in full, exactly as it appears, because every single word of this passage is doing more work than the people who chose it may even realize. To those I love, when I am gone, release me. Let me go? I have so many things to see and do. You must not tie yourself to me with tears. Be happy that we had so many years. I gave you love. You can only guess how much you gave me in happiness. I thank you for the love each have shown. But now it is time I travel alone. So grieve a while for me, if grieve you must. Then let your grief be comforted by trust. It is only for a while that we must part. So bless those memories within your heart. I will not be far away, for life goes on. So if you need me, call, and I will come. Those who cannot see or touch me, I will be near. And if you listen with your heart, you will hear all of my love around you, soft and clear. Then when you must come this way alone, I will greet you with a smile and welcome home. I do not know exactly which book or which hymnal or which old service guide that passage originally came from. If any of you in the comments recognize the source, please drop it below, because I have a feeling more than a few of you have heard those words before. But what I want to focus on, what I want to highlight, what I want to underline 3 times in red ink, is the very first stanza. Because the very first stanza is where the entire hidden message lives. When I am gone, release me. Let me go? I have so many things to see and do. You must not tie yourself to me with tears. Be happy that we had so many years. Read those lines once. Read them twice. Read them again. And then ask yourself the question that I have been asking myself for the last hour. Why this passage? Out of every passage in every book, in every hymnal, in every funeral parlor, in every century, why did the parents of Ashlee Robinson, the parents of a young woman whose death is still under international investigation, the parents who have been criticized by the entire internet for not flying to Tanzania, for not screaming louder, for not demanding more, choose this exact passage to hand out to the world tonight? When I am gone, release me. Let me go? Because here is what I think this card is doing, and you can disagree with me in the comments. You can call me wrong. You can tell me I am projecting, but I want you to sit with this theory for at least 60 seconds before you reject it. A lot of us, myself included, have been openly questioning the parents over the last several weeks. We have been asking why they have not boarded a plane to Tanzania. We have been asking why they have not stood in front of the embassy. We have been asking why they have not gone scorched earth in front of every camera that has been pointed at them. We have been asking, in not so many words, why they have not been louder. And I have always pushed back on that line of questioning, gently but firmly, for 3 reasons. The first is that, frankly, it is none of our business. The second is that we, as outsiders, owe these parents the basic grace that we would want extended to ourselves if we were in their shoes. And the third, and most important, is that there are lawyers involved, there are publicists involved, there are diplomatic advisors involved, and the version of this case that plays out in public can look radically different from the version that is being fought, hour by hour, in private rooms where the lights stay on long after midnight. We are seeing a fraction. They are living the whole of it. So the natural human reaction is to fill in the gaps with our own assumptions, because that is what we do as people. We cannot tolerate uncertainty, so we manufacture certainty out of whatever raw material is in front of us. And tonight, the raw material in front of me is this card. And the message I am pulling out of this card, the one that I cannot stop thinking about, is that maybe the parents have already decided. Maybe the parents have already arrived at a place that we, on the outside, have not arrived at yet. Maybe their faith has carried them to a position that says, we are going to release this. We are going to let God handle the rest. We are going to let Tanzania do whatever Tanzania is going to do. We are going to let the embassy push whatever it can push. We are going to let Joe McCann's status, suspect or witness, be what it is going to be. And we are not going to tear ourselves apart in front of the world while that machinery does its work in the background. When I am gone, release me. Let me go? That is the message I am pulling out of this card. Again, I am not telling you it is a fact. I am not telling you the parents have privately given up on getting answers. I am not telling you that they have closed the door on accountability. I am only telling you what the words of this passage, in the context of this case, in the rhythm of this night, are quietly suggesting to anybody who is paying close enough attention. And the more I read it, the more I am convinced that this passage was not chosen at random. This passage was chosen with intention. And in a story where the family has, by every public account, said as little as possible, the things they are willing to say, even indirectly, even through the back of a printed card, deserve to be read with the same seriousness as a press conference. So I am going to ask you to do something for me. I am going to ask you to sit with this passage for the rest of the night. Read it to yourself. Read it to somebody else. And then come back to this video and tell me, in the comments, what you think it is really saying. Tell me whether you think I am reading too much into it, or whether you think I am reading exactly the right amount into it. Tell me whether you have heard this passage before and where. Tell me whether you think the parents have arrived at a place of release, or whether you think they are still, behind closed doors, fighting for every answer they can pry loose. Because I will be honest with you, I am still not entirely sure what I think. And the only way I am going to figure it out is by reading every single comment that this video produces. Let me also be very honest about one more thing before I close out tonight, because I want to be careful not to leave you with a false impression of how this room felt. The white attendees that I have been pointing to throughout this video, the ones whose presence raised so many questions in my head, were not cold. They were not strange. They were not standing apart from the rest of the room. They were warm. They were embracing. They were crying. They were hugging Ashlee's mother, hugging Ashlee's father, hugging the step-parents, hugging the children, hugging strangers who had only walked in because of a story they read online. They moved through that receiving line like family. Like real family. Like people who had known Ashlee for a long time and were not just going to be processed and walked back out the side door. Whatever the connection was, whatever last name they were carrying, whatever branch of the larger family tree they belonged to, the way they grieved was indistinguishable from the way the closest blood relatives in the room grieved. And I want you to take that observation and do whatever you want with it. Maybe it tells you that this is just a deeply blended family that has held itself together better than the internet has given it credit for. Maybe it tells you that there is a side of this story that has not yet been written into any article. Maybe it tells you nothing at all, and you walk away thinking that grief, real grief, looks the same on every face regardless of what last name is stitched into the back of the suit. I am not telling you which conclusion is correct. I am simply handing you the observation, the way I would hand it to a friend, and trusting you to sit with it. So here is where we are, on May the 4th, just before I pack up and head home for the night. We do not officially know how Ashley Jana died. We do not officially know whether Joe McCann is a suspect or a witness. We do not officially know what Tanzania is going to release, or when, or whether the United States will be allowed to do anything more than receive whatever scraps of information are tossed across the embassy desk. We do not officially know who the unfamiliar mourners at this wake actually were. We do not officially know whether the message I think I am reading on the back of this card is actually a message at all, or just a coincidence of grief. We are surrounded by questions. And, in every direction, the institutions that should be answering those questions are quiet. So we, the public, are left with what we have. We are left with observation. We are left with passages. We are left with the way a father refuses to cry in front of strangers and the way a mother allows herself to. We are left with the way a famous face slips into the back of a small church, watches a video tribute through black sunglasses, and quietly lets himself out the same door he came in through. We are left with the way an entire community in Paulsboro, New Jersey closed its arms around a daughter and refused to let the noise of the world drown out the love of this room. These are the things we have. These are the things we are going to keep. And these are the things we are going to use, piece by piece, to keep the story of Ashley Jana alive until the answers, whatever they may be, finally find their way home. Tomorrow morning, on May the 5th, I will be back in this exact spot. The wake continues from 9 in the morning to 11, and the funeral itself will run from 11 to 12. There is additional information about what happens after the funeral that has already been shared with me, and I am going to hold that information until tomorrow, because some of it deserves to be presented in its proper context, and tonight is not the night to rush it. So if you are following this case, if you have been watching this channel from the very first upload on this story, you do not want to miss tomorrow's video. We are going to come back here. We are going to stand in this same spot. We are going to bring you whatever new pieces of the picture come into focus. And we are going to keep doing it the way we have done it from the beginning, which is with as much respect for the family as a video camera will allow. Before I sign off, I have a few small asks, and I want to keep them brief, because the gravity of tonight does not deserve to be drowned out by a sales pitch. If this video gave you something, anything, whether it was information you did not have, a perspective you had not considered, or simply the comfort of knowing somebody is on the ground for you, please leave a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me what you think of the passage on that card. Tell me whether you think those unfamiliar attendees were McCann family or something else entirely. Tell me what you would have done in the parents' shoes. Every single comment is read. Every single one shapes the way I cover this story going forward. Please also hit like if you have not already. Hit subscribe if you are new here, and for the love of everything that is good in this world, please tap the notification bell, because I will be live tomorrow morning, and I would hate for you to find out about the funeral coverage 3 hours after the fact, when somebody else has already fed it to you in a low-resolution clip on a different platform. There is also a join button right next to the subscribe button for those who want to be part of the inner circle on this channel, where we go deeper, where we share info that does not always make the main feed, and where we treat each other like a community rather than an audience. If that interests you, you know where to click. I am also going to pin our most recent Ashley Jana coverage in the comments, in case any of you are coming into this story late and need to catch up. Watch every video on this channel that we have ever uploaded about this case, in order, and you will be more informed than 99% of the people typing about it on social media tonight. And if you have made it all the way to this point in this video, I want to personally thank you, because I know this was a long one, and I know it was a heavy one, and I know there were moments where you probably had to pause and sit with what I was saying. The fact that you stayed with me all the way through means more to me than I can put into words. YouTube is going to recommend another video for you in just a moment. Click on it. Stay with us. Stay with this story. Stay with this family from a respectful distance, and stay close to this channel, because tomorrow morning, when the sun comes up over Paulsboro, New Jersey, we are going to walk back into this story together. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being an audience that demands truth without demanding spectacle. I will see you in the morning. Rest in peace, Ashlee. We are all listening.